in Stockport, and also talk about then what we sort of think the leadership requirements are of the sector and how they might have changed over time. And that really spawned 2 or 3 years ago discussion between Andy King and myself about certainly post pandemic. We developed this transformational leadership program that we've put across the whole of Greater Manchester, across the GM Active collective. But we've also taken that transformational leadership program elsewhere across the country, and different organisations have taken that up. It's due for a sort of refresh. But as an example, I did a little snapshot of it. I had a full day with London Borough of Southwark last week. They obviously went through an insourcing process about 18 months ago. They're finding that whilst council members thought once they'd insourced that was the end of it, they've discovered that's actually just the start of it. And so we did a great facilitated day where we talked about, you know, the requirements of leadership and the opportunities. And this is given where we are as a sector now, most organisations are looking at things not through the lens of being an operator of facilities, but this more holistic, active wellbeing service, you know, and that our commitment. So as an example, our view in Stockport here is that we've got a borough of 300,000 people, and our commitment is to those 300,000 people, not and to meet them where they are, and to provide a service to every single one of them if we possibly can. The provision of activity within facilities is simply an element of it. And it's an element largely for those who are already motivated to take care of their own health. And actually, you know, the bigger challenge is how do we engage and provide services for, you know, a far greater majority of the population. And to turn that into, and therefore, what do we need to think about from a leadership point of view in that context? And obviously, this plays into Sport England's consideration of things at the moment. It plays into this concept of system thinking, of place-based leadership, all of those sort of watchwords that we all hear and perhaps sometimes don't fully understand. They are they're words of the moment, I suppose, but they are very important that as a sector we come to terms with them, start to understand. And so we now, hence the little image there on the screen, we're thinking about leadership in the from a perspective of a network of leadership rather than in traditional layered hierarchical sort of things. And when we're thinking about our organizations, I suppose, do we organize our organization from the position of place, or do we organize or make arrangements of do we resource our organization to serve the needs of the organization, or do we resource according to the needs of the place? And I picked that phrase and question up off a podcast that Andy King shared only yesterday on LinkedIn, which I would, if Andy could share that, I'd encourage it. It's a good listen. So this is the type of thing that we're thinking about and trying to apply in Stockport. It's the concept of leadership as a network, and therefore, what does that mean for leaders, and how do we build increased capability within leaders and increased capacity in leadership? And one of the to encourage you to sort of think about leadership different, I recommend this as a YouTube piece by it's a TED talk It's on, you find it on YouTube by Gitta Fredrickson. And it very simply, great leadership is a network, not a hierarchy. And so what we're doing is really challenging the traditional way that we've thought about leadership, which I'm sure you can appreciate. But again, it's a dead easy thing to listen to. It's not very long, but it's really well worth a listen. And this was the thing that I was, when this is the conversation Dave and I had prior to this, him asking me to do this. When I arrived in Stockport, what I found was an organisation that had been successful, had developed lots of great things from a cultural point of view and what have you. However, I nearly said but, never used the word but. And it was an organisation that was constructed in a very traditional way. It's quite top down. It was siloed, and it had multiple layers. So it was hierarchical, and it's quite interesting. And if you'll have worked for organisations, obviously in the past, those types of approaches do establish quite strong features of culture. And if they're there for a long time, sometimes they're quite difficult to budge and change. And so thinking about changing leadership and changing leadership philosophy, changing leadership style isn't an instant thing. You have to work on it. Nothing happens immediately. Nothing happens easily. But it's a worthwhile pursuit in the end. So that's worth just sort of making a note of. So what I tend to do is think about leadership, have a definition for leadership, and start to think about leadership as distinct from management, and be really clear with people that there is this sort of distinction between leadership and management. Management tends to be very functional. It's got a place, but it sort of does things rather than necessarily inspires for the future. And sort of getting this concept about the traditional form of leadership is leaders have followers, and they sort of still do. But I try to sort of, in this, thinking about the concept of a leadership network, try to think of leadership as sort of leading from behind rather than leading from the front. The reason I say that is leadership is actually about other people. It's not about the leader. But leadership does start from somewhere. And so we use this definition of leadership, which is as good a one as I've sort of come across. Leaders provide an inspiration for others to perform at levels they didn't think possible, and then they get out of the way. And when we talk about this concept in the Transformational Leadership Program, I split it down into three clear elements. There's the inspirational part. Something has to start somewhere, and that's often the leader. It's then about inspiring others. It is about other people. Does what you do, what you say, how you behave, the ideas you share, the interaction, the relationships that you develop, does it inspire people and bring the best out of them? Because your results as a leader are only a product of the environment that you create for other people. And this is why it's really so important that we think about leadership as creating a landscape and an environment for others to excel. It's not about yourself. And it's critical then, once you do that, the third element then is which is often, when we do these things, it's often the hardest bit. It's the getting out of the way. And it's amazing how many, and I won't share where it came from, but I have this sort of leadership skills template that I sometimes share get people to complete. And there's probably 16 or 20 leadership characteristics, and I get them to sort of self-reflect and score on themselves at the start of a program, and then rescore themselves later on. And one of the criteria I trust others to perform. And the amount of people, when they're being honest and they self-reflect, score themselves very highly on building rapport, building relationships and all that, but actually are quite honest and say, I actually don't trust many people in my organization. Well, that's a huge red flag in terms of, from a leadership thing. And this getting out of the way is a critical thing. If it's about creating a landscape for other people, creating the conditions for them to excel, because it's them that have got the talent, them that have got all the capability, you've recruited them and organized them in a way in which they can fulfill their own potential and consequently fulfill the organization's potential. Why would you smother them as a leader? So that's how we start to think. That's why we sort of use this definition, and why I quite like that definition. And then one of the things that we tend to do is I've got a whole series of these, what I call leadership anchors, but these are my front six, really, that we tend to use to start to get people to think about their accountability for as leaders themselves. Because of course, what the concept of a leadership network is that you end up not with a single leader in an organization, you end up with multiple leaders across your organization, and you bring those leaders together, and they cross-fertilize and they cross-function and they do all those sorts of. So you're wanting to sort of develop leadership skills in all of them. So leadership is coming from all parts of the organization. But in order to get some consistency in culture and consistency approach, there are some, I call them anchors of leadership, some consistency in thinking and philosophy around leadership. And these are my six. So the first one, and I tend to say to people, if you remember nothing else, remember this one. The very first one is, it's not necessary to have all the answers, but essential to be asking the right questions. And this plays to the issue, a really important leadership trait of humility. Saying, I don't know the answer to that. What do you think? There shouldn't be this compunction upon leaders to have all the answers. There shouldn't be there to, when asked a question, they simply give an answer, because that's not developing. That's not thinking about others. And actually, you endear yourself to other people if you show humility. You build stronger relationships with others if you demonstrate your own vulnerability and humility. And this thing of, actually, it's a shared thing. And so language is also important. The concept of we is far more important than I. And I'm a firm believer that, nobody has all the answers anyway. But if we do, but we have all got the ability to find solutions, and finding solutions is simply about asking, being really curious. So this is the next thing about the next feature of leadership that comes out of this first anchor. The first one is humility, and the second one is curiosity. Curiosity is really, really important feature of leadership. I've got a desire to change. I've got a desire to make things better. Leadership comes with accountability to change, to create, to continually be better. And that comes by this sort of insatiable desire to be curious and to be asking, cute questions, and to be quite obsessive about it. And then I tend to sort of, shift quickly onto something that sometimes people find quite challenging. And that's the next leadership anchor of, if it ain't broke, break it. This is when people start to get nervous about things, and you start into, this principle of challenging convention. It sounds, if it ain't broke, break it, sounds disruptive. Well, sort of being disruptive sort of goes with modern leadership. This desire to change, particularly in the context of we understand that we've all contributed to the system that we've got. And if we're going to change that, if we're going to change the outcomes of things, we're going to challenge issues around population health and issues about health inequity, then we've got to be prepared to change the status quo. We've got to be prepared to change the system. And so this, again, this anchor of be prepared to be disruptive, be prepared to break things that are, and in the commercial context, of course, this is also really, really important. I use an analogy called, I don't know whether you've come across the concept of the boiled frog. I won't go into it now, but look up boiled frog syndrome, and this sort of explains it all to you. And if it ain't broke, break it really ensures that as leaders we're never complacent. We're always looking. Yeah, but we're in business. You're either going forwards or backwards. There is no status quo, and this sort of ensures that. And if you're not onto things, then others will be in a commercial context. So we've got to be constantly challenging in the things that we're currently dealing with, and trying to reinvent ourselves. And there are lots of great examples in the business world about how continually reinventing yourself generates growth and generates innovation and great ideas. And then the third one, we talk about dealing with problems, not symptoms. This making sure that leaders understand the difference between cause and effect. Often, traditionally, it's very easy to see a problem that we think is a problem, but it's actually not. And this is this thing about, particularly around system thinking, the concept of upstream thinking, and build a discipline into your leadership where, when faced with a challenge, consider whether that challenge is actually the problem itself, or whether it's simply a symptom to a problem that lies somewhere else. And that's another really important thing. And too often in organizations, we tend to deal with symptoms rather than root problems. And again, this is classic system thinking stuff. Do what's right, not what's easy. My dad used to say this all the time to me, and therefore I thought it was his quote. When I started to research it, I discovered that it was a general in the Boer War or something like that who originally conceived it. But again, this is a great discipline. If you as a leader, if you've established a real sense of purpose and definition for what your organization is, it's really important that the decisions that we make are always aligned to that purpose. It gives us discipline. This anchor gives us discipline and integrity about staying aligned to purpose. And again, it's sometimes very easy to make what we think are pragmatic and easy decisions, and we avoid confrontation, or we take the least line of resistance. But actually it erodes faith in the organization, and it sometimes compromises, the sort of raison d'etre that really should be most important to us. And then my fifth one is this sort of being intolerant of mediocrity. It's a great thing to have, and I tend to use something that I read a book by Ben Ryan, who was an English coach of rugby sevens, and he went and coached Fijian team, who traditionally had been always flamboyant, terrific to watch, and never won anything, and he led them to success in as Olympic champions or world champions. And one of the phrases he uses is, the standard you walk past is the standard you become. And again, I think leaders do have a responsibility to establish, they set pace, they set standards, they set the tone of things, they set the climate of things. And so that fifth anchor of being tolerant of mediocrity is quite a useful trait to have. And then the final one again, which sometimes people get a little bit uncomfortable about, but I think it's really, really important, is because sometimes we can be quite ponderous traditionally. Organizations can, we tend not to, we have ideas and it takes ages to put them into place. We tend, and never before, I think, the customers, consumers, communities, neighborhoods, we live in society now that does want things, is changing fast. And so this notion of, if you're in control, you're not going fast enough, this sort of imperative, I think, to be urgent, to be responsive, to be fairly rapid with things, I think is a really important leadership trait. So those are the sort of 6 anchors that we use, and there are others that sort of follow. And then going back to this thing about the principle of leadership, this going back to the sort of very and that last one, by the way, this if you're in control, you're not going fast enough. Again, as a leader, you're there to control the pace of things, and sometimes you have to row forward, and sometimes you have to sense what others are feeling and how they're feeling about your pace. Often your mind thinks quicker than your team's, and you have to sometimes row back. So you have to be sensitive how others are dealing with your pace and your expectations. And so that's a really important feature of leadership. And so what leadership then tends to be is, if it's about other people, before to have any chance of understanding others, you've got to first understand yourself. So this notion of being emotionally aware and having emotional intelligence is a really big piece of work, and having being cognizant of your impact, how your communication, your non-verbal communication, your actions, your behaviors, your responses, and all of those sorts of things, what impact do they have on other people? How do you make others feel? And so reflects the ability to self-reflect as a leader is critical, and understanding you is the sort of first prerequisite. And then you can go on to understand others. And I use these sort of 3 beliefs about people that are sort of a bedrock to get this sort of sense of, because people make the world go round, not money, is my firm belief. And so when we're thinking about leadership, leadership is you're not leading an organization, you're leading human beings. And so having that ability to understand other people is absolutely critical. So everyone is different, so treat them accordingly. Everyone is more capable than most people give them credit for. These are real sort of pillars of beliefs about people that I think are really quite helpful. And then the third one is, no one comes to work to deliberately do a bad job. This ability to find the positives in people, do everything from a strengths-based perspective, look for the good in things, rather than look for the bad. Don't look to fill gaps, look to build on strengths. I think I talk about that. And we've used this, we've used the Clifton Strengths model, I suppose, which sort of illustrates that, what will happen when we think about what is right with people rather than fixating on what is wrong. I didn't know he'd said that before. I've been using my 3 beliefs about people for donkey's years, and I was sort of completely oblivious to Don Clifton's statement, but it also starts to sort of hang together. And so we did a piece of work with our senior leadership team, and then we've extended that to this sort of broader senior leadership group that we've got to try and build on this concept of how do we build in my organization currently the sense of a leadership network, and how do we do it from a strengths-based perspective, so that everybody feels that they've got where I use the word exploit quite a lot. I believe it's not a bad word. I think our duty is to exploit people's strengths, not to highlight their weaknesses. And we tend in life to want to do the things we like to do, the things that we're good at. It's a human behavior, and therefore our duty really is to ensure that we find ways in our organization for our people to do the things that they're really, really good at. Sometimes you have people who are the right people for your organization, but they're in the wrong role. And then we're not really setting them up, they're setting them up for success. And so this thinking about strengths and those three beliefs about people as a bedrock is quite a useful discipline. My phone keeps going on. So these are some things that sort of tend to pop up as a consequence of these are the outcomes of things. People who focus on the strength are 3 times as likely to report having an excellent quality of life, 6 times as likely to be engaged in their jobs, etc., etc. You don't need me to read those out, and I'll send the presentation across, and Dave can share it with everybody. Get rid of that. And that's the sort of thing that you get as a consequence of that. That's an example of what you get from those are the sort of 34 strengths, and the whole principle of the Clifton Strengths model is that you don't have weaknesses, you just have lesser strengths. And again, it's quite a helpful approach from a leadership philosophy point of view, and it's quite enlightening. We've used this as a consequence. We've got challenges, and we've started to think about, okay, well, we're butting up against things. Why can't we resolve this? And then we've been able to refer back to our strengths, and we're saying, actually, the people who are involved in this challenge perhaps don't have the strengths that we need to overcome that challenge. Let's put people who've got the right strengths in charge of this challenge that we've got. Helps us understand why we relate in the way that we do with one another, and how we might nuance our approach to resolving any challenges that we might have. So if we're developing a new vision for the organization, don't ask people who are who are just brilliant at business as usual and functional stuff and don't have any strategic qualities. Find all the people in your organization who've got that ideation, strategic capability, futuristic type thing. Get those in a room to try to shape your vision for the future. And then finally, once we do all those sorts of things, we do it again. Strong feature of the transformational leadership program is thinking about culture and how we use culture to our organizational advantage. And we have to understand what culture actually is, and culture is not how we'd like it to be. It's not what it says on the wall. It's how it actually is, and how we actually make people feel. This sort of "we are what we repeatedly do" sets your culture. And so there's quite a bit of stuff on that, and we have to understand where culture comes from. Culture is just a product of lots and lots of people's individual behavior. And if culture is a product of people's behavior, we have to understand where that behavior comes from. And that behavior comes from their beliefs. And the beliefs that have shaped the life of, I'm being very generalistic and probably inappropriate, but what shapes the beliefs of a 55-year-old female receptionist will be very different to what has shaped the beliefs of an 18-year-old male lifeguard. And to expect them simply to adopt then these cultural things and the values of our organization And if we want to change culture and we want to change behavior, we have to be prepared to peel the onion back and go back to beliefs. And that's, that's never easy, but that's understanding what culture is and how we get culture and how we can use it is quite an important thing. And that's it. There you go.
Well, thank you, John. I mean, I found that unbelievably interesting and really, really enjoyed that. So thank you very much for your time today. I mean, I'll take it to the rest of
well, any questions, any comments? I'm okay for 5 minutes. So,
John, it was really interesting. It touches on lots of themes I've kind of seen before, which is quite refreshing in some regards, and one or two nuances as well. I'd be interested in, probably the killer question is, what have you seen as the impacts when you've introduced it to your own organisation or others, John?
I mean, I think the nice thing is that we tend to get positive reactions. Not all the concepts are easy, is what I would say, Darren. I think when you're trying to develop leadership in others, there has got to be a preparedness in themselves to want to challenge themselves and they have to have a desire to make change. I mean, I've made changes in myself. I find it hard, and I'm constant. It's a never-ending journey. I'm quite old now, and I still think that I'm reflecting and changing and adapting because I need to, and I'm learning stuff. So it is a continual learning journey, and that's not for everybody, of course. The impact that we've got, certainly across and Andy will talk about this, I'm sure, the Transformational Leadership Program, where we're now on cohorts 5 and 6. There've been 20 around about 20 in each. So that's 100 leaders across Greater Manchester that have tasted a little some of that stuff. And we get some good comments. We had a GM Active board meeting yesterday, actually, and it even comes across now. And people talk about it. And they talk about the change in others, and they talk about but there is another layer that we're talking about. The need to perpetuate it. Andy and I have been talking about how we perpetuate it through a coaching and mentoring program. But they recall things. I mean, bear in mind, I've been doing this a long time. I mean, I work for SLM. I've got senior people in GLL who've had all this stuff. And some of the nice things is, I bumped into Simon Sen, who's ops director at GLL last year at one of the shows. He was with me in 1997, and he said, "I still use your stuff now." Mm-hmm. So it does land with people, and it resonates. So that's quite nice. And we do see, and people's perspectives do change, and of course things change over time as well. So that's a little bit of the style of it. But like anything, Darren, not everybody wants to. They'll take it as far as they feel that they want to take it. But I think generally I think that we've been successful in increasing the capacity of leadership across GM and increasing the capability of it, and we get positive feedback as a consequence.
Okay. Yeah. Cheers.
Rob's got his hand raised. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, John, cheers for that. It was really, really interesting listening to that. I suppose loads and loads of things swirling around in mind and things regularly sort of that we're talking about and considering in my active. But the one thing that springs to mind is going back to some of the anchors that you talked about, not walking past stuff that you think is not happening in the right way, and, getting stuff done, otherwise you're being passed by. From a leadership perspective, making a start and doing something. What's been your take on that? Because I think sometimes previously I've fallen into a position whereby I want to try and build an approach that is very, very clear and, it is easy to communicate. But then versus sometimes where actually you've just got to get stuff done. You've just got to make a start somewhere and build it. What's been your take
Yeah.
over the time of life leisure around that particular question mark and
Yeah.
that way of thinking?
I mean, I mean, when I came into an existing organisation, so I tried to sort of take the temperature of it and assess the climate. And then and of course, what I've learned is you can't do everything, and you have to choose the things that you need to change, and you have to have respect as to where things have come from, and you don't get everything right all of the time. What I would say directly back to that, I strongly believe in the notion of start somewhere and start anywhere, and start and build allies, and start in the places where you've got allies, because you can't do this stuff on your own.
Yeah.
So where others are seeing the opportunity and they're with you, do some stuff there and do it fairly quickly. The other thing that I would say is that don't have a sense, and there was a little video clip of me that I did with Elena from Stronger Wellness on LinkedIn. One of the things that I learned over the years is that you don't have to, I use this phrase, if you want perfect, all you'll get is shiny and late. So nothing has to be, you don't have to have everything 100%. If you've got something about 75% there, get it in and make stuff happen. It's more important to get things going, because most things tend to be iterative anyway. You'll need to refine things. So this principle, sort of minimum viable product type thing, get the bare bones in so that you can see you're starting to get that sense of change happening. So yeah, and it avoids sort of prevarication and all of those sorts of things. Yeah. And everybody has their own leadership style, and whilst I've got some principles, I have a particular style, and my style is not, you will have your own style, and it we find the things that work for us. So that nature of having a sort of philosophy about things, I think, is a good one. Yeah. So and some people are more comfortable with lots of structure and lots of organization, and others are less so. And I think one of the things, as I say, when we're making those types of judgments, it's also needs to be, I'm not a huge fan of sort of formality and a huge fan of process. I like more flexibility because it creates more freedom and sort of innovation. But I do recognise that others sometimes need structure and process, and then I have to sort of adjust and make sure that I put it in and I meet the needs of others. Yeah,
that's interesting. And as well, I suppose, coming from an individual or an organization, there's a different lens to that as well, isn't it? How you communicate and how you like to work, but then how the organization might need to communicate and work as well.
Yeah.
So there's lots of different factors that play into that, which are sometimes quite difficult to balance, I think, when you want to move quite quickly and you want to be clear and concise in terms of what you're doing. But then you want to inject pace into stuff and change stuff as well.
Yeah, and I mean the big challenge, and you don't, as I said, I mean, one of the biggest challenges I had was when I went into places which was sort of, we have 9,000 employees and 160 mil turnover and 130 sites, and a very particular approach to things, establishing, trying to have a sort of change approach there was quite a challenge. Again, you have to select the things that you do, but yeah. Johnny had his hand up.
I think Roland was first.
Yeah,
actually.
sorry,
Apologies.
terrible chair today.
Apologies for joining a little later. I completely forgot about David's email informing us that we have an earlier start. Um, John, that was excellent. I mean, I've I've I've, I've seen this leadership styles and used some of them myself over the years, but you've just been so successful in articulating it so well. Um, one of the interesting bits was around the if it's not broke, break it.
Yeah, right.
I thought
Yeah,
that was so interesting because I have heard about the boiling frog
yeah,
um, strategy, and I thought it was really interesting because that's potentially why some businesses get into trouble because you slowly just uh, accept this.
yeah,
Suddenly you're stuck. It's too late, but
exactly,
before you do
exactly.
anything about it. So I think it's really fantastic. The question I have for you, John, is in my mind, over the years, I've always thought these leadership skills and techniques, how lower down can we use it? Because I believe that some of these can be applied even as low as supervisors to have that thinking. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I'm with you, Roland, and that's this concept of a leadership network. I think our duty is to create leaders throughout our organizations in whatever role. So don't think about things from a siloed and hierarchical point of view, because we're all human beings, and the supervisors, lifeguards, they've got, some of them will really, some of these things would resonate with them. They would like them, and if we present them to them, they would do something with them. And I think so. I think it is possible because they're simply behavioural things largely. And if they elicit the right type of behaviours, though, it doesn't, then the more of the right type of behaviours that you've got going on in throughout the organisation, that can only be a positive thing. And I think that you then create an environment where responsibility is taken more eagerly throughout the organisation. They understand the concept of accountability and what have you. You're not having to force that on them. And you create an environment where ideas come from all over the organisation, and they're not just held in at the senior end of the organisation. So I think you can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you've just helped me out there. Next week, I'm taking the Lambton Leisure team out on an away day to set out and talk about next year operational plans. I've got junior managers there. I was thinking about a
Brilliant.
topic, and I think you've just given me a topic to
Brilliant.
introduce to the team next week.
Brilliant.
And if I could just add to that, and sorry, like I said, I don't know Zoom, so I don't know how to raise my hand, but quite often when we're out working with teams, delivering, CX workshops, etc., we can have lifeguards, reception, DM, GM, chief execs join us. But the key message there is always, you are the catalyst to change. It could be any team member. So that's a really strong message coming through.
Yeah.
John, please.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Thanks, John. I mean, it's always, good to hear your thoughts on things. And I suppose I've got a comment and probably a question. And this is obviously, I know this is a passion for you. This is something that's really deeply important to you. And I think that the comment would be that this is perhaps a great example of taking some time, an hour and a half out every now and again for a group such as this to just say, right, let's just forget the P&L for a minute. Let's forget the day-to-day and just pause and think and reflect in a sort of semi-confidential world and share ideas. So I think it's absolutely right to have this as a subject to discuss and kind of kick around a bit, and to have somebody with your experience and passion and knowledge to lead it is excellent. So that's the comment. The question, I suppose, is a little bit more detailed, and I'm not a board member of CIMSPA anymore. Roland and I sit on the audit and probity committee, so I still have an involvement. But I was just wondering what your thoughts are. If CIMSPA are the people, if you like, to what extent do you feel they are supporting or engaging in this modern leadership system-based thinking?
Good question. I mean, I think CIMSPA have had a challenge over a period of years that was about the organisation's sustainability and the ability to maintain an organisation in that space that could continually adapt to the changing nature of what the sport and physical activity sector needed. And I think have had to make choices around sustainability that has been about ensuring a broad membership rather than the principle of creating enhanced leadership capability across the sector. So I would say that I think that for lots of reasons, I don't believe that leadership has been sufficiently focused within CIMSPA. I think I would like to see more of it, but of course it's a shifting piece as well. The Transformational Leadership Programme gets 10 CPD, 10 CIMSPA points, or whatever they are. So I think it sort of undervalues it really, but I'd like to see leadership capability and leadership capacity play a larger role in CIMSPA's activity, I think is how I would respond.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I don't disagree with you either. No. Okay. Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Andy.
Yeah, morning all. Apologies for the delay at the start. I was on another call. Yeah, I think it's an interesting discussion about CIMSPA and funding and stuff like this in particular. And it's a long story really, because we have had various conversations with CIMSPA to see if this is something that from the sort of GM angle, could it be sort of given over and rolled out? But that's not been deemed the right thing to do to this stage. But there's two things going on really. One is the local skills accountability boards, which is a bit frustrating how slow those things are going and no money's flowing. The plans are only just coming about now, but there's some sort of hope that maybe there could be something in there. But unfortunately, again, a lot of the plans don't really have leadership development in them. Sort of more concerned with lifeguards and the sort of operational things and things like that, which is a bit of a missed opportunity potentially. But the second one is definitely an opportunity, is the place-based funding from Sport England, and particularly the universal offer. Ken Massa, from Youth has been involved in that, and my understanding is through Ken is that if a place that is a reciprocant of some of this universal offer, which is a lot of places, then if they feel that this is something that they wanted to do, and particularly, I suppose, really at the moment, a lot of the place-based funding has been going on sort of everything outside of our, if you like, leisure sector. But if this was deemed something that was useful, my understanding is, and I know some places are putting this forward to say, we want to have something like this. It doesn't have to be the transformational leadership, but that's the one that seems to be in vogue at the moment and what people know about. Then that funding could be used to actually roll this out into a place and upskill staff on that basis. So that might be an opportunity for people if they were interested in in doing something like this with John or with others.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Andy. And I find it really interesting because, if you think about our workforce, we've got 5 generations in it right now. And we know Gen Z want the story, they want the vision, they want to be coached, they don't want to be managed per se. It's just it seems like an obvious, doesn't it, to implement this leadership program into our organizations. John, I know thank you so much for spending more time with us than you probably planned. So thank you very much. I think on behalf of everyone, we found that really, really interesting today. So thank you.
No, well, if anybody wants to follow up, or if your colleagues and what have you, I'll send the slides over, and we